Eddie, what are you doing in that fireplace again? You know you're not supposed to sit...
How did the whimsical laughter of television's most lovable monsters conceal real-life heartbreak and hidden tragedy? In 1964, the Munsters welcomed viewers into the delightfully macabre world of 1313, Mockingbird Lane, a house filled with misfit creatures striving to live an ordinary suburban life. For audiences, it was charmingly offbeat, a hilarious twist on classic horror icons. But behind the makeup, beneath those iconic costumes and quirky smiles, lay a reality far darker, a truth shrouded in personal struggles, loss, and quiet despair. Fred Gwynne, forever remembered as the gentle giant Herman Munster, spent years haunted by his iconic role, struggling against the crushing weight of typecasting that followed him relentlessly. The radiant Yvonne De Carlo, known to millions as Lily Munster, found herself trapped between a glittering Hollywood past and the harsh reality of personal anguish and financial uncertainty. Al Lewis, the eccentric and ever-charming Grandpa Munster, hid behind a facade of laughter, weaving an intricate web of half-truths and mystery around his life, truths that even today remain elusive. Then there was Beverly Owen, the original Marilyn Munster, whose abrupt departure after just 13 episodes left audiences wondering why a rising star would walk away from fame at its height. Behind her sudden exit was a profound emotional turmoil, a battle fought quietly in the shadows. Even notable guest stars like Bob Hastings, Paul Lynde, and John Keredine, each acclaimed in their own right, were not immune from the shadows that seemed to envelop those connected to the series. Their lives, too, were punctuated by inner struggles, disappointments, and tragic fates that seemed an ironic reflection of the show's playful darkness. More than half a century later, we return to 1313, Mockingbird Lane, to explore the lives behind the legends, uncovering hidden scars, forgotten dreams, and heartbreaking truths. Join us on this cinematic journey into nostalgia and melancholy, as we honor the unforgettable actors of the Munsters, whose laughter on screen echoed a far more poignant and haunting reality. Fred Gwynne, the brilliant tragedy beneath the makeup. Behind the hulking frame, behind the green face and bolt-on forehead, Fred Gwynne was never just Herman Munster. He was a Harvard-educated intellectual, a classically trained actor, a baritone with a painter's eye and a poet's soul, trapped in a monster suit for the rest of his life. Born in New York City in 1926, Gwynne grew up in privilege but carried a restless spirit. After serving in the Navy during World War II, he returned to study literature and art at Harvard, joining the ranks of the Hasty Pudding Club and drawing cartoons for the Lampoon. He had the look of a scholar, the instincts of a stage actor, and yet fate pushed him towards something else, something strange and unforgettable. By the time the Munsters premiered in 1964, Fred had already tasted television fame through Car 54, Where Are You?, playing the soft-spoken Officer Muldoon. But it was Herman Munster that catapulted him into pop culture immortality and professional purgatory. Fred hated being typecast. He resented the way people called him Herman in the streets, how casting directors couldn't see past the makeup. His voice, deep and commanding, was built for Shakespeare. His spirit longed for Broadway. But the shadow of the Frankenstein mask was too long. Even when he returned in The Munsters' Revenge in 1981, it wasn't out of love. It was because NBC shockingly agreed to his outrageous salary demand, a request made only to turn them down. Still, Gwyn endured. He reinvented himself in films like Pet Sematary and My Cousin Vinny, where he gave what many consider his finest performance as a stern, Southern judge with deadpan brilliance. Off-screen, he poured his talent into children's books, witty, whimsical, beautifully illustrated. He was a man of paradoxes, private but theatrical, reclusive yet unforgettable. When he died of pancreatic cancer in 1993, just 8 days shy of his 67th birthday, the world lost more than Herman Munster. It lost a mind too big for a single mask and a heart that never quite escaped the role that made him famous. Yvonne De Carlo, from Technicolor temptress to Gothic matriarch. Long before she wore the bat-wing dress and the stoic frown of Lily Munster, Yvonne De Carlo was a shimmering icon of old Hollywood. crowned the Queen of Technicolor for her breathtaking presence in vivid hues. She was every inch the exotic beauty that studios in the 1940s adored and commodified. Born Margaret Yvonne Middleton in Vancouver in 1922, she was raised by a single mother after her father abandoned the family. Her childhood was steeped in hardship and hustle, shaped by dreams of stardom and the cold glare of survival. Her mother pushed her toward performance with a fire that would carry Yvonne across borders and through decades. In the post-war years, she became a staple of swashbuckling adventures and westerns, playing saloon girls, pirates, and desert queens. Always seductive, rarely taken seriously. But in 1956, she stunned critics and audiences alike with her dignified turn as Sephora, the wife of Moses, in the Ten Commandments. It was a breakout of a different kind, a woman long cast for her body, now honored for her presence. Yet even that triumph couldn't protect her from the fickle tides of Hollywood. As roles dried up, she accepted a part that would change her life and trap it. When the Munsters came calling, she took the role of Lily not for ambition, but out of necessity. Her husband, stuntman Bob Morgan, had suffered a horrific accident filming how the West was won, and hospital bills were mounting. She didn't expect the show to explode. She certainly didn't expect to become a gothic sitcom matriarch, adored by millions yet reduced to a black and white caricature of everything she once was. And though she was grateful, she admitted the role cast a long shadow over the rest of her career. Still, she never stopped working. From guest roles in Murder, she wrote to cameos in cult horror flicks. Yvonne carried on with the stoic grace of someone who had seen the best and worst of show business. In her final years, she resided in the motion picture and television hospital, far from the bright lights she once commanded. She passed away on January 8, 2007, from natural causes. Her Technicolor legend dimmed quietly, but never forgotten. Al Lewis, the rebel in Grandpa's cape. They called him Grandpa, but there was nothing frail or feeble about Al Lewis. Beneath the widow's peak and vampire cloak was a firebrand, an actor, activist, provocateur, who never fit into any coffin Hollywood tried to shove him into. Born Alexander Meister, though he told 100 versions of his origin story, Al was a man who played with facts the way Grandpa Munster played with potions. He claimed to have a PhD in child psychology, to have fought in World War II, to have been born in upstate New York, yet records dispute all of it. What is certain is that he exploded onto screens in the 1960s, first as the loudmouth officer schnauzer in Car 54, Where Are You? And then as the manic, bug-eyed grandpa in the Munsters. Lewis was a master of presence. Squinting, snarling, grinning with a cheap cigar in his teeth, he wasn't just comic relief. He was chaos wrapped in charm. He brought a mad scientist's joy to every scene, always a few degrees removed from sanity, but never from heart. Off-screen, he was even louder. After the Munsters faded, Lewis ran a restaurant in Greenwich Village called Grandpa's, hosted radio shows, marched in protests, and ran for governor of New York under the Green Party. He didn't win, but he got enough votes to put his party on the ballot for 4 more years. He campaigned not as Al Lewis, but as Grandpa, blurring the lines between character and crusader. But his loudest cause was always truth, whatever version of it he chose that day. He loathed phoniness, despised authority, and had no patience for Hollywood pretense. His passion for people, especially children, ran deep. He made educational videos, visited schools, and saw his celebrity as a platform to provoke change. When he died of natural causes in New York on February 3, 2006, at the age of 82, he left behind more questions than answers. But perhaps that was the point. Al Lewis was never meant to be understood. He was meant to be felt, like a jolt of mischief, like a laugh that burns on the edges, like a grandfather you'd never dare disobey. Beverly Owen, the first Marilyn and the quiet goodbye. She was the only normal one in a house full of monsters. Yet in real life, Beverly Owen was the one who walked away. Before the fangs, the claws, and the canned laughter, she was just a young actress with a gentle presence and striking intelligence, fresh out of the University of Michigan, struggling to find her place in a chaotic industry. She worked behind the scenes at CBS, typed scripts badly enough to get fired more than once, and eventually landed minor roles on soaps and westerns. Then came the call that would define and almost immediately erase her career. She was cast as Marilyn Munster, the sweet blonde niece in the Munsters, a role drenched in irony. The normal girl surrounded by creatures, yet pitted for her looks. But Beverly wasn't built for Hollywood's long game. Just 13 episodes into the series, she left. Not for another role, not because she was fired, but because she chose love. She married John Stone, a visionary behind Sesame Street, and quietly traded fame for family. To many, it seemed like a footnote. To her, it was a liberation. While others fought to stay relevant, she went on to raise 2 daughters, earned a master's degree in early American history, and lived far from cameras, red carpets, and reruns. Still, her brief time on the Munsters left an imprint. Fans remember the innocence she brought, the contrast that made the show even funnier, even sadder. But recognition was rare. With the blonde wig and limited screen time, she was often forgotten, overshadowed by the actress who replaced her. And maybe that's how she wanted it. Beverly never chased the spotlight. She slipped away quietly, living with dignity, grace, and a life of her choosing. She died on February 21, 2019, from ovarian cancer at the age of 81. There were no headlines, no network specials, just a soft echo from a black and white world, and a role that, though short-lived, has never quite faded. She was the first Marilyn Munster, the one who left before the curtain fell. Bob Hastings, the voice behind the curtain, the face at the funeral parlor. As Mr. Gateman, the perpetually grim boss at the funeral home where Herman Munster worked, Bob Hastings brought a quiet menace to the Munsters, a reminder that even in a house of monsters, the real world still loomed with expectations, jobs, and deadlines. It was a small role, recurring but restrained, and yet it echoed with his signature knack for playing authority figures just on the edge of absurdity. But Hastings' legacy wasn't limited to live action. He was a giant in the world of voice acting, immortalized as Commissioner Gordon in Batman, the animated series, a steady presence in the dark shadows of Gotham. Starting as a radio actor in the 1940s, Hastings had a career that spanned 6 decades, always shifting, always adapting. Whether on-screen in sitcoms or behind the mic in animation booths, he brought a workmanlike consistency that made him a favorite of producers and fans alike. In his final years, he battled prostate cancer, and on June 30th, 2014, he passed away at the age of 89. Quiet, dignified, and underrated to the end, Bob Hastings may have played the man who ran a funeral home, but he left behind a life filled with voices that refused to be buried. Mike Mazerki, the gentle giant with a menacing face. When Mike Mazerki appeared in the Munsters as Big Leo DeRocher, his presence was impossible to ignore. Towering at 6 feet 5 inches, with a face sculpted for noir villains and underworld enforcers, Mazerki looked like a nightmare, but lived like a gentleman. A former pro wrestler turned prolific character actor, he spent decades in Hollywood playing the heavy, the brute, the man who said little and broke jaws. But off-screen, he was charming, educated, and fiercely loyal to his craft. His career spanned classics like Murder, My Sweet and Night, and The City, and he became a fixture in gangster flicks and TV dramas alike. Yet it was in oddball shows like The Munsters where his physicality found room for humor, a hulking figure who could make even monsters nervous. In later years, he focused on his beloved Cauliflower Alley Club, supporting aging wrestlers and preserving a forgotten history. On December 9, 1990, he died of heart failure in Glendale, California, at the age of 82. For all the fear he inspired on screen, Mike Mazerki left behind a legacy of kindness, discipline, and the surprising grace of a man who never let size define soul. Paul Lynde, the wicked wit behind the curtain. In The Munsters' Revenge, 1981, Paul Lynde brought his trademark sting to the role of Dr. Diablo, a villain with flair, sarcasm, and more than a little mischief. It was a brief appearance, but unmistakably Lynde. Theatrical, biting, and just a little dangerous. Best known for his work on Bewitched and as the razor-tongued center square on Hollywood Squares, Lynde carved a space in pop culture as the campy voice of comic cruelty. He was a man who could make cruelty funny and pain invisible. Behind the barbs was a deeply private soul, Tormented by the restrictions of his era and his inability to live openly, Lind masked loneliness with bravado. His humor dazzled, but it deflected. In the early 1980s, he retreated from public life, his career dimmed by time and personal struggle. On January 10, 1982, he was found dead in his Beverly Hills home, the victim of a heart attack. He was just 55. The laugh that once cut like a knife went silent far too soon. But in every wicked grin and every biting quip, Paul Lynde lives on, as television's most unforgettable misfit. John Keredine, the horror legend who visited Mockingbird Lane. When Munster, Go Home, hit theaters in 1966, it brought with it not just the original cast, but a touch of Gothic royalty in the form of John Keredine. As Crookshank, the sinister butler with a slithering voice and a face carved from decades of horror, Keredine brought instant credibility to the Munster family's big-screen debut. But his legacy reached far beyond one film. He was the patriarch of a Hollywood dynasty, the go-to-ghoul of 1930s and 1940s cinema, and a man whose deep voice echoed through over 200 films, many of them soaked in shadow and dread. Behind the camera, he was a Shakespearean purist, a wanderer, and a man of restless intellect. His life was turbulent, marked by multiple marriages, financial struggles, and years spent riding the fringes of the industry he once helped shape. In the final chapter of his life, his health declined rapidly, and in 1988, during a trip to Milan, Italy, he passed away from multiple organ failure at the age of 82. He died far from Hollywood, but not from its memory. John Keredine left behind more than just a filmography. He left behind a family of actors and a reputation as one of the last true titans of classic horror. In the strange, funny, and fondly remembered world of the Munsters, his presence was a dark crown atop a family of monsters. Jane Withers, the child star who grew into a character icon. By the time Jane Withers appeared in The Munsters' Revenge in 1981 as the delightfully eccentric Mother Frickard, she was already a legend twice over. As a child actress in the 1930s, she was one of the few who could hold her own against Shirley Temple, bringing sass and spark to Depression-era screens. Later in life, she reinvented herself with character roles that embraced the weird and whimsical, making her a natural fit for the Munsters universe. Off-screen, Withers was known for her devout faith, vast doll collection, and magnetic warmth that drew people in wherever she went. She never sought tabloid fame or bitter comebacks. Instead, she lived a long, grounded life that defied Hollywood's usual arc. Her final years were spent in comfort and quiet dignity, and on August 7, 2021, she passed away peacefully of natural causes at the age of 95. For many, she was a forgotten face from a black and white past. But in the world of character actors and enduring joy, Jane Withers never really disappeared. She just stepped quietly behind the curtain. They were monsters on screen, but off-screen, they were human in the most fragile, heartbreaking ways. The Munsters gave the world a twisted version of the American dream. A Frankenstein father, a vampire mother, a werewolf child, a mad scientist grandpa, and a niece who looked normal but never quite fit in. Behind the makeup and laugh tracks, though, lived real people, brilliant, broken, ambitious, tired, each with their own story far stranger and sadder than any sitcom plot. Fred Gwynne never escaped Herman's shadow, a Harvard intellectual cursed by typecasting. Yvonne De Carlo, once a Hollywood goddess, took the role of Lily to pay her husband's hospital bills and found herself forever remembered for what she tried to leave behind. Al Lewis, always a rebel, used his fame to fight for the forgotten, and Beverly Owen vanished from the spotlight long before the show was ever canceled, her silence louder than any applause. Around them orbited guest stars and forgotten legends. John Keredine's haunted presence, Jane Withers' fading glow, Paul Lynde's pain behind the punchlines, Mike Mazerki's hulking tenderness, Bob Hastings' quiet strength. Some died quietly, others died young. All left behind something no studio could ever replicate. And maybe that's the real story of the Munsters. Not the gags or the ghouls, but the legacy of misfits who made us laugh while quietly carrying the weight of being misunderstood. Their deaths remind us that time doesn't just take legends. It takes people. Real people. with dreams, regrets, and final chapters written in silence. So tonight, if you find yourself flipping through channels and stumble upon that creaky old house at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, pause, watch, listen, and remember, these weren't just monsters. They were souls who burned bright under layers of latex and laughter. And now, they live on not just in syndication, but in the stories we choose to tell. If their memory moved you, don't forget to follow this channel. Because in every forgotten frame, there's still a heart beating, waiting to be remembered.